Okay, so today we're diving into anxious attachment in relationships.
Right?
And, I think a lot of people listening are probably going to recognize this in their own relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so common.
That kind of worry, like, am I really seen in this relationship? Am I valued? And what if this connection I care about so much just slips away?
Yeah, that fear of losing the connection is huge.
Totally. And if that sounds familiar, you're not alone at all. And really understanding these patterns can be such a powerful first step to creating those secure and fulfilling relationships we all want, the kind of connections that feel really good and solid.
And that's exactly it. When you start exploring anxious attachment,
Mm.
you realize it's not just so many people feel these things. It's just that they can be so hard to talk about.
Oh, for sure. It can feel really isolating, even though, like you said, it's incredibly common.
Right.
So, to really get a handle on all of this for this deep dive, we've been looking at a couple of really interesting things.
Okay.
One is this coaching program that's actually specifically designed to help people heal anxious attachment, which I thought was so interesting.
Very cool. Yeah, I've heard good things about those kinds of programs.
Yeah, and we've also been looking at the work of a therapist who specializes in couples therapy and, how these attachment dynamics play out in relationships.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super relevant to this. Attachment stuff comes up all the time in couples therapy.
Totally. And what's been really eye-opening for me in all of this is, you start to see that those really intense feelings you might experience in relationships or those times you react in a way that maybe you don't feel so good about later,
Right.
those aren't some fixed part of who you are.
Definitely not.
Like they can shift and change.
Totally. It's all about learning and growing.
Exactly. So our mission today is to really unpack all of that for you. Like, what does anxious attachment actually look like day to day in your interactions with people?
Right. Like, how does it show up?
Exactly. And what are the anxieties that are really driving it? What's going on under the surface?
Yeah, getting to the root of it.
And then the really important part, what are some of those steps you can actually start taking to move toward feeling more secure and connected?
Yeah. Like, what can you actually do about it?
Okay, so let's jump right in with that. Like, what is anxious attachment really at its core? What are we even talking about here?
Yeah, let's break it down.
Well, from everything we've been looking at, it seems like at the heart of it, there's this deep fear of abandonment.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's that worry that the person you care about is going to leave, or that they don't really value you or want you in their life.
Right, and that can be so painful to feel.
Oh, absolutely. And here's the thing that I thought was so interesting, that the behaviors that come from that fear, things like constantly needing reassurance from your partner or always being the one to reach out,
Hmm.
those can actually push your partner away.
Oh, wow, yeah, like it backfires.
It's like you're trying to hold on so tight that you end up creating the very distance that you're terrified of.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, right?
Yeah, totally. And someone with this kind of anxious attachment style might, you know, be constantly seeking validation from their partner.
Right.
Or they might initiate contact way more often, or maybe feel this urge to just merge with their partner, like get so close so quickly that it can feel overwhelming.
Yeah, and all of that's coming from this place of wanting to feel safe and secure, but it can end up having the opposite effect.
Exactly. So can we break this down even more? Like, what does that actually look like in a relationship?
Yeah, let's get into some specifics.
It's like the more you try to pull someone close to soothe your anxiety, the more they might feel like they need to back up.
Yeah, they need space to breathe.
Exactly. And it becomes this cycle that just keeps going. And a big part of that cycle, it seems like, are these emotional triggers.
Oh yeah, triggers are huge.
Like, a text message that takes a little longer to get a reply than you expected, or your partner saying they just need a little bit of alone time.
Right.
These little things can set off all these anxious thoughts and feelings.
And it's not even that those things are actually a problem in themselves. It's more like they're triggering these deeper fears and insecurities.
Exactly. They're like alarm bells going off in your head.
And the coaching program we were looking at really dives into that, how to understand those underlying attachment patterns and how they were formed.
Yeah, like where did this all begin?
Right. Because it's not just about managing those surface level reactions. It's about getting to the root of why you connect with people in the ways you do.
I see. So it's like you need to understand how you got here before you can really start making changes.
Exactly. You have to go back to the beginning.
So week 1 of the program focuses on helping you figure out your own attachment style.
Okay. That's a good starting point.
And then week 2 is all about digging into those early experiences, the relationships you had when you were younger, and figuring out if any limiting beliefs about relationships might have formed because of them.
Interesting. So it's like going back and looking at your childhood to see how it might be affecting your adult relationships.
Exactly. And here's what's so important if you're recognizing any of this in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The worry, the triggers, the way you react, all of it.
Yeah,
These patterns can actually change.
that's so important for people to hear.
Yeah.
It's not hopeless.
Not at all. There's so much possibility for healing and creating more secure connections.
Okay, so let's talk about that healing process. Like, where do you even begin?
Well, it seems like a big part of it is learning to manage those really intense emotions that come up when you get triggered.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, you need to be able to calm yourself down when you're feeling anxious.
Exactly. And the program really emphasizes calming your nervous system
All right.
because when those triggers happen, your body goes into fight or flight mode.
Like that adrenaline rush.
Totally. And so learning how to regulate that physiological response, like how to move from reacting automatically to actually choosing a more grounded response.
That sounds incredibly valuable.
Oh, it's huge. It's like rewiring your brain. It's about consistently practicing new ways of responding to those triggers so that over time you're strengthening those pathways in your brain that are associated with feeling safe and secure.
So it's like you're building new habits around how you deal with anxiety.
Exactly. And there's also this idea of healing the inner child,
Okay.
which is basically about acknowledging and comforting those younger parts of yourself that experience those early relationship insecurities.
So it's about giving yourself the love and care you might not have received as a child.
Exactly.
Mm.
And when you're in that really heightened state of anxiety, it can feel impossible to think straight or communicate what you need.
Oh, totally. You're just overwhelmed.
So calming that internal alarm system down is such a vital first step.
Yeah, for sure. You need that foundation of calm before you can do anything else.
Exactly. And once you have a little bit more space to breathe emotionally, what comes next?
Okay, well, once you've got a handle on those intense emotions, the next step is about being able to identify and communicate your emotional needs in your relationships. And this can be really tough for people with an anxious attachment style because there's often that fear of being seen as too needy or, of having your needs rejected.
Oh, absolutely. It can feel so vulnerable to put yourself out there like that.
It really can. But the thing is, healthy, secure relationships depend on both partners being able to clearly express what they need in a way that feels respectful.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are scared to voice their needs because they're worried it'll push their partner away.
Right, exactly. But actually not talking about your needs can be even more damaging in the long run.
So it's about finding that balance between being assertive and also being sensitive to your partner's needs.
Right, and EFT, emotionally focused therapy, really gets into that.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
It's all about identifying and meeting those core emotional needs within a relationship so you can build that secure attachment bond.
That makes sense. And it seems like boundaries are a big part of that too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Boundaries are crucial.
Because if you can communicate what you need, you also need to understand your own limits, like what feels okay to you and what doesn't.
Totally. And the program actually talks about developing clear and compassionate boundaries to support connection.
I love that phrasing, compassionate boundaries.
Me too. It emphasizes that boundaries aren't about shutting people out. They're about creating a safe space for everyone.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
setting those limits with kindness and understanding both for yourself and your partner.
Right. And it's not about building walls. It's about creating a foundation for deeper and more authentic connection.
I like that. And so once you have that understanding of your needs and your boundaries, then it becomes about how you communicate those things.
Exactly. Communication is key.
Which leads us to this idea of assertive and emotionally open communication.
So important and can be really challenging.
Yeah, especially if you're used to being more reactive or, holding back your feelings.
Right. Or not even being fully aware of what your feelings are.
Totally. So it's about learning to express yourself honestly and respectfully without blaming or criticizing your partner.
Yeah, being able to really listen to what they're saying, too.
And being able to receive their perspective.
Right. It's about creating that space for open dialogue where both people feel heard and understood.
It's like building that bridge of understanding.
It is, and it takes practice, which is what the coaching program's all about.
So it's interesting how the program lays out these steps. It starts with understanding your patterns, then learning to regulate your emotions, then figuring out your needs, setting boundaries, and then developing those communication skills.
Yeah, it's like a roadmap for healing.
It's so helpful to have that kind of structure.
Totally. It can feel really overwhelming otherwise.
And it's not a quick fix either. It takes time and consistency.
Definitely changing those ingrained patterns isn't going to happen overnight.
And the program also really emphasizes in that last week the importance of making those new patterns stick, anchoring them in and creating a long-term plan for growth.
Yeah, that long-term perspective is so important. It's about recognizing that this is a journey.
It's not about reaching some perfect state of secure attachment. It's about making progress, learning from setbacks, and building that resilience over time.
Right. It's about accepting that there will be ups and downs.
Absolutely. And this whole process reminds me of the therapist we were talking about earlier, Beatrice Lorette.
Oh, yeah, she's amazing.
Her approach seems so in line with all of this.
Totally. She's got over a decade of experience working with this stuff, and she specializes in EFT.
Right, which we were just talking about.
It's a really powerful approach that helps people create those secure and lasting bonds.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that EFT typically involves a pretty big commitment, like 8 to 25 sessions,
Wow, that's a lot.
which really shows that this kind of deep emotional work, it takes time.
Yeah, you can't rush it.
And Beatrice also has training in the Gottman method, which is another really respected approach to couples therapy.
Gottman method. Yeah, I've heard of that one too.
Yeah.
It's really well known.
And she's also trained in differentiation neurobiology and attachment. So she really has this comprehensive understanding of how all these things connect.
She's like the total package.
And she works with hundreds of couples, both online and in person across Texas. So she's got a lot of practical experience.
It's so cool that there are people like her out there, who are really dedicated to helping people with this.
It is. And, while a coaching program like the one we looked at isn't a substitute for therapy,
Right.
it can be a really great starting point.
Totally. It can give you those initial insights and tools and that sense of community that can be so helpful.
Absolutely. So as we wrap things up here, what are the key things to remember about understanding and healing anxious attachment?
Okay, well, first it's important to remember that anxious attachment often comes from that deep fear of abandonment.
Right.
And it can lead to behaviors that, even though you have good intentions, can actually create distance in your relationships.
Yeah, to those patterns that we were talking about.
But here's the crucial thing. Those patterns, they're not permanent. They can change.
That's so important to remember.
And healing involves a bunch of different things, like understanding your attachment style and your triggers, learning how to calm your nervous system when you get anxious, figuring out what your needs are, setting healthy boundaries, and then communicating all of that in a clear and compassionate way.
So it's about taking all of that and creating a long-term plan for growth and stronger relationships.
Exactly. And there are some really great approaches out there like EFT and the Gottman method that can provide a framework for doing that work.
This has been such a helpful conversation. It's amazing how much you can learn about yourself and your relationships by really understanding this stuff.
I know, it's so empowering.
And it's important to remember that asking for support, whether it's through a program like the one we talked about or through therapy, it's a sign of strength.
Absolutely. It shows you're committed to your well-being and to having those healthy connections.
So as you go about your day today, I want you to think about this. How might looking at your own reactions in your relationships through this lens of anxious attachment, how might that give you a new perspective on your interactions and your desires for connection?
Yeah, that's a great question to reflect on.
And what could be one small step that you can take starting today to build that more secure way of relating that you deserve?
That's a beautiful thought to leave people with.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be this huge, overwhelming thing. Just one small step in the right direction can make all the difference.